So welcome to the Vortex Garage. You know, we've got some great projects that we're working on and some excellent features that I think you'll really enjoy. But in the meantime, I did find some old footage on a small job we did about 6 or 8 months ago. And that was working on this car, a C5 Corvette. Now this particular car does have a Magnuson Supercharger installed on it, and in the videos that we're going to show, we've walked through replacing this belt on the back of the blower assembly. Now the Magnuson setup here is essentially an Eaton M112 core, and if you're used to seeing that on, say, a Ford F-150 Lightning or an 03-04 Cobra, you're probably used to seeing this flipped around 180 degrees. On those, the snout comes off the front with the drive pulley that's run either off of the main serpentine system or an auxiliary 8-rib setup. What Magnuson did is, because of the setup of the LS engines, the way the intake's in the front and the throttle body position, they've gone ahead and rotated the blower assembly around 180 degrees to kind of keep this where it was originally. To go ahead and get drive to the system, they've created this jack shaft assembly. What this does is, using this cast piece here with a bearing inside back to this piece here, it transfers the power from the main serpentine system to this auxiliary belt in the back, thus driving the blower. Now in our case, we'll show you the belt actually had a split in it, so we went ahead and replaced it. Now, doing a little bit of research, it seemed that one of the methods for doing that was actually sending the blower back to Magnuson, but some additional research did show that you can kind of loosen the assembly back here, take the tension off, and you've got just enough room to go ahead and walk the pulley off a rib at a time, or walk the belt off a rib at a time, and reinstall the new one. So that's what we did. And this is our issue today. This is actually what we're going to be swapping out. As you can see, this belt has seen better days. It's got a split that pretty much runs the length of it. So we're going to take it off and replace it. And then we're also, before we put the new one on, we're going to inspect those pulleys, make sure everything's good. And then, of course, we'll tension everything correctly. Okay, so here's the belt we're going to be installing. This is a Gates K080220. It's a 22-inch belt with 8 ribs. And in this particular case, it's a very short, small belt, and this isn't something I was able to find readily at an auto parts store. I think you can order them pretty easily and have them shipped to your local store. I think Napa might have a part number for one of these, but it is probably manufactured by Gates. I think Gates is pretty much the only one who makes this belt. I don't know if Goodyear makes any or any other manufacturers. Okay, so we're on the other side of the motor. We're going to just take a look at things to figure out how we want to go forth in actually removing this belt. I actually couldn't really find too many good instructions. Generally, the way these ship, when you get the kit, they actually ship with the belt installed. So I was able to dig around and find a little bit of information. And also, one of the big things was the actual tension. We're going to want about a 1/4 inch movement on the middle of the belt when we retension it. First things first, we're going to go ahead and loosen the front belt. This is the belt tensioner for that, so I'm going to take this off and pop the belt off so we have this free in case we need to spin it. Judging by how this is set up, this is all one piece, so there's no pivot action on the front of the jack shaft, but that way we at least are able to spin it if we need to. All right, so moving around back, so this is our rear pulley assembly. There's a bracket, this piece right here, that attaches to the back of the body of the supercharger. It looks like it has 3 of these. These are 15 mil bolts, and that looks like that's what really holds the bracket onto the actual supercharger body. In here, there's an Allen key bolt, and as you can see, and hopefully you can see, that actually goes up against here, and by screwing that in or out, it would actually allow you to move the whole bracket assembly in or out, very small amounts, allowing you to set the tension on this. So that's your tension screw. So we're going to pull that out. We're going to loosen that. And then we're going to go ahead, and I think we just loosen these 3 bolts enough that we can move this bracket assembly. We should be able to pivot it inward, give us enough slack to wiggle this belt off, get the new one on, pull it out, and set the tension. All right, so first things first, we're going to release our front belt tension. So I'm going to come in from this side. Let's go ahead and need to loosen it a bit. Okay, just like that. Enough to slide it off the alternator. It's nice and easy to get to when we come back. Okay, we'll let the tensioner slide out. Pop that off, and we're all set. Now we've got the tension loose on the front belt, so if we need to spin that jack shaft, we can. But the other nice thing, as we're rotating in the back here and we're actually pivoting this forward, we're not going to have the tension on here kind of pulling it in the opposite direction. So that ought to make the job just a little bit easier. All right, so next we're going to go ahead and loosen the tensioner screw, and that uses a 5mm Allen wrench. You could use a socket for that, but I found the sockets I have, they're a little bit too tight, the way that tensioner screw is actually very close to the bracket and the body of the blower. So we're just going to use a standard wrench. So this is a regular Allen key wrench. We're going to come in and loosen it, and we're actually going to loosen this until where it protrudes from the block here that it goes in. We kind of want that flush. The idea is that when we take the tension off the bracket, we want to be able to slide the bracket and pulley assembly towards this piece without having the tension screw get in the way. That way we get the maximum amount of travel on that and then are able to slip the belt off without having to actually remove the bracket. All right, for the next step, we're going to go ahead and take a 15mm wrench and we're going to loosen the 3 bolts on the bracket, just enough so that hopefully we can go ahead and slide the bracket towards the driver's side, giving us the slack we need to pull the belt off. One broke loose. Break the bottom one loose. Okay, so even with the tension removed, this is going to be a tight fit. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk the belt off a rib at a time. So to do that, we're going to come to the other side of the car. I'm going to actually be pulling up on the jack shaft and then pushing the belt as I spin it. And that should walk it right off the pulley. So trying to walk the belt off a single pulley, I basically would get about halfway and then the tension would get so tight it was pretty hard to continue on and actually spin it. So I'm changing tactics a bit. I'm going to walk it off a rib at a time on each pulley and then actually walk the belt off rather than try to just walk it off a single pulley. Basically the angle of which we would end up going to stretches too much, so I'm going to try to go a little bit at a time. It's pretty easy to walk it off the first few ribs. It's that third and fourth one that get tough. All right, we're making some progress. It's slow going, that's for sure. So I'm basically just working the belt backwards and forwards. And as I do that, kind of pulling it up off the ribs as I go. So backwards and forwards and then pulling it forward to walk it off the ribs. And that seems to be working pretty well. Try to get it around far enough so it sort of locks into the ribs. That way it doesn't pop back on me as I keep turning it. So, and got to put a little bit of effort into it. There we go. And we're almost off. So I'm using the front pulley. I actually took the belt off the front. Like I said, we had already loosened it, so I just popped it off so I can get my hand around easy and spin it. So I can use this hand to spin the pulley system, and then this hand to basically pull this back and start walking it off. And we are close. There's only about one more rib to go on the jack shaft pulley, and we got it. It's going to come off. There we go. So we're going to keep spinning, and here we go, the belt is off. Oh, we got these hoses in the way. And there we go. There's our old belt. So before we put our new belt on, I'm just going to kind of go through these pulleys and take a look at them. I want to look for anything that is bad on them. These are actually press fit pulleys, so there's nothing much I can do with them today. But I do want to look for bad, bent ribs or anything like that. Any foreign material in there I want to clean out, just to make sure we don't have anything that could be a problem. All right, so we can now get ready to fit our new belt, and we're going to probably want to put it on much the same way it came off. So we'll get it started. Over the lips of the pulleys, turning it to help it get seated. Put it on. Okay, so then we got it started. Let me go ahead and just zoom out a bit so you can see how I'm doing this. So much the same way, we're gonna basically be spinning it to walk it on the ribs, a little bit at a time. It actually is going on easier than it comes off, so at least so far. So the idea is once you get it on one of the ribs, go ahead and bring it around so that the full length of where you got it started comes around the other end. That way you're nice and seated on that rib. It's not going to slip off very easily. Okay, so as you walk to one side, go to the next. Okay, one on that side. One on that side. And we're just going to take this one all the way on. And then this one all the way on. And there we go. Our new belt is on. All right, now that our new belt is on, we're going to go ahead and get these finger tight. These are the 3 bolts on the actual bracket assembly. Okay, and we're gonna... All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use a pretty big screwdriver here as a pry bar, a flathead with a rag around it. And I'm gonna be real careful on everything, so I'm gonna put a little bit of tension so I can pull the jack shaft back where it needs to be, kind of get our start tension set. And with that done, I'm going to go ahead and tighten these down, and that'll hold our bracket in place. Once we have these tight, then we can set our final tension after we put the serpentine belt on the front. Before we set our final tension, we're going to go ahead and put our serpentine belt back on. So before we do the alternator pulley, I'm just going to put this up here, and then I'm going to check on the bottom, make sure we haven't slipped off anything else. No, I'm looking okay. All right, so at this stage, I'm going to go ahead and mount our bar and then pull that down. Pull in our slack, making sure we don't slide off any of the other pulleys. Pull back around our alternator and let it go. And then just real quick, I'm going to do a visual inspection. Make sure we haven't slipped off any of the pulleys. And we're looking fine. So shouldn't throw a belt. Shouldn't have any issues. All right, now that we have our serpentine belt reinstalled in the front, we're going to go ahead and set our tension. And to do that, we're going to use a ruler and our Allen key screw, Allen key wrench. Okay, so we've basically used our Allen key wrench and got our tension screw set, so it's now seated on this piece here. If we were to try to tighten any further, we'd be in the point where we're applying tension because we'd be basically pushing this pulley out. But before we do that, we have 2 things we need to do. Number 1, you saw me tighten these back bolts so I could put the bracket down earlier. That was so that I could go ahead and put the front belt on and know when I set this tension screw, I had a basic amount of tension already set. I'm going to want to loosen those to free that bracket up to move, so when I set my tension with the tension screw, it'll actually move, and then we can go ahead and tighten them the final time we're going to do it. So, before we do any tension, we're going to go ahead and free these up. just a bit. And what that'll do, the reason we're doing it this way is that now that this is seated against here, the tension screw, that tension screw is going to hold this piece. So we're not going to lose this amount of tension that we had already put on it. Okay, so we've still got a pretty good amount of tension. We've got these a little bit loose. So we can take our ruler next, and we can go ahead and hold that up here. Right in the center is where we want to press and get our deflection. And I'm seeing about a 1/2 inch deflection. So we're going to want to tighten that screw so we get under the 1/4 inch mark. Okay, so using our Allen key wrench, we're going to go ahead and do a couple turns on our tension screw. Okay, go ahead and check our tension again. All right, so I would say that's a little bit less than 1/4 inch tension. It's nice and tight feeling. And what we can do at this point, in order to make sure we keep that tension, we're going to go ahead and tighten these, again, not to over tighten them, but we're going to go ahead and tighten them one last time. And our job is done. So our belt is now on, it's tensioned, it's all set and ready to go. Our front serpentine system's back on. So we're now ready to go ahead and start up the car and see how it sounds. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I know it might have been a little short, but it does show you some of the jobs we're going to be doing here on the Vortex Garage. Some of the other projects, well, we've got this 2003 Mercury Mountaineer that's come in with some reported rather serious driveline binding issues. We're going to take a look at it, walk you through doing some diagnostics, find out what's wrong, and do a fix. We'll also be focusing on how these all-wheel drive systems work, and very importantly, the importance of having the right tire size diameter matching on all 4 corners. And along with that, I think the viscous coupling's bad in the transfer case. We've also got a Grand Cherokee back there. It's a WJ. It just got a full fluid service as well as some pretty extensive suspension maintenance. We've got those videos. They're all done, just need to be edited. We'll go ahead and get them uploaded. Finally, some of those features. We've got some great tool tech that we're working on. We're looking forward to getting those taken care of and put together and uploaded. I think you'll really enjoy them. In the meantime, feel free to look us up on Facebook at facebook.com/vortexgarage.